What characterizes the role of a teacher in a differentiated classroom? In the course of this show, we'll visit 4 classrooms to answer this question with the help of Carol Tomlinson.
A teacher in a differentiated classroom has several roles to play, and those will shift in priority over time. And those would be things like being really reflective about students, being very thoughtful about curriculum, trying to make connections between those things, establishing an atmosphere in which maximum learning can take place. I think a teacher in a differentiated classroom allows himself or herself to be more fully a professional, to use those skills that we think of as being the hallmarks of professionals.
I told you guys that we would start off with 2 different methods of persuasion, and we looked at writing persuasively.
Savina Allen teaches English in a middle school in Silver Spring, Maryland. We join her class during a unit on persuasive writing.
I have to persuade my parents, sometimes to go rent games.
Our unit is going to deal with memory. And what I'd like you to do is I would like you to look at this overhead. Okay, memory is what makes our lives what? Without it, we are nothing.
Jeannie Critchfield teaches psychology in a high school in Scottsdale, Arizona.
What is another way of remembering information? Not just looking, but hearing, audio.
Class, we worked yesterday with finding an average by working with popcorn pieces, didn't we? Today we're going to go one step further and talk about the steps that we take to find an average without having to count everything and make separate little piles.
Sharon Rowe teaches a 5th grade class in Alexandria, Virginia, where she team teaches with special education teacher Connie Falco.
Somebody tell me the steps again that you're going to take to find an average.
Okay, well yesterday we started a new study, and I asked you what you knew about government, and most of you said,
No clue.
not much.
Judy Rex teaches a 3rd and 4th grade multi-age class in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're beginning a unit on government.
And we talked a little bit about what government is and the big idea we were going for, and we started to ask some questions about it.
These teachers will help us examine the role of the teacher in a differentiated classroom. Just as students are often engaged in a variety of activities, so is the teacher. In a differentiated classroom, whole class instruction remains part of a teacher's repertoire.
Think about, of all the
Whole class instruction clearly will always be part of a classroom. Introducing an idea makes great sense to a whole class.
this. And when I was thinking about it, I thought, you just have barely begun to scratch the surface to know about government. Now I need to ask you, when we start to do research, because we did this for patriotism, this is just a quick review, talk with somebody right next to you about what the first steps in research are. What are the very first steps in research?
Well, if you have the paper, you can, there's a choice and you could flip through and try to find that, but you might find other things, so you want to learn about that.
When we're meeting as a whole group, we're discussing where we're going possibly, where we've been, what concerns we have along the way. If, for example, we're starting a topic of study that everybody on a pre-assessment really has little or no knowledge about, we'll come together and do that. Just sitting here, I was hearing some great ideas, so if you have a great idea, Hillary.
Find what you might want to learn about, and then maybe you can go to the library and find a book just on that.
Okay, so first you pick a topic, and then you find information.
You look through papers and you just...
Resources?
How many resources do you think?
We should have more than one. Yeah. Papers, internet.
Okay. So internet, books, encyclopedias. Hold on a second. What's the next step on your topic?
So certainly I think there are times in not only every classroom, but in every unit and probably in every week in a classroom that whole class instruction is a part of what needs to go on. That will vary with the age of the student, the subject matter being taught, the newness of the subject to students, the speed at which they can learn it. But clearly there are times in every class where the teacher will teach the whole group.
So it's important that you understand not only about memory, how to take care of your memory, how to use your memory. And today's lesson, if you'll take a look at the board on our learning goals, we're going to compare and contrast the different kinds of memory, explain the memory process, and describe various kinds of forgetting.
In a differentiated classroom, students often work in groups, so the teacher's role includes helping groups to work successfully.
I think it's a huge teacher role to make sure that directions for groups are very clear, that students know what to do, how to do it, and why it's important. It ought not to be just, here it is, I said so, so do it. And then to make sure we've specified not only the task to be done, but our expectation for levels of quality. Do we expect just one response? Do we expect the best response? Do we expect multiple responses within some sense of why they think one is better than others?
The rubric is on the back so that you can self-assess and you know what exactly it is that I'm looking for in your persuasive writing and in the second component also.
So we're working on multiple levels. What is the nature of the task, and are they clear about that? Do they understand what we expect for a mode of working and level of quality?
It says, what was the average number of books borrowed per category during week 1?
The teacher also needs to check and say, not only have I made the task clear, the working conditions clear, but am I sure that there's a way for each student to access the information? That it isn't fair to ask a student to do a task when in fact they might be able to understand it and do it if they could read the directions or get the research material done, but we bar them from success by not enabling that to happen.
Do you mind taking your things on over to sit beside Kenny? He's having a little bit of trouble with the English part of it, so if you could help him out with the reading. Aaron will read it with you, okay?
It may mean having some materials audio taped, may mean having partnerships where some students have other roles that are academic roles in that task, but a student is assigned as a reader who is a competent reader.
If the two of you put your heads together, put your smart math at it to work with it, Aaron will help you with understanding what it's asking, and you guys will be done in no time. Great, thank you.
Which type of book average more takeouts in 4 weeks, adventure books or children's books?
A key goal in a classroom that is responsive to students is to match the task to the student's readiness for that task. It's really important, I think, to always try to teach up a little bit, to try to make sure that if anything we've given a kid a task that's a little bit too challenging rather than one that's too simple. And we need as teachers to be on the alert for that.
The last time when we did 5-paragraph essays, you started off with it and then you came to me and said that you didn't really want to do it because you didn't feel comfortable yet with it. So do you want to try to do this one now? I think that the work that you've been producing lately is certainly an indication that you should be working on a 5-paragraph essay right now. Okay? So, if you're having trouble with the introduction and the concluding paragraph, you need to just come see me so that we can talk about it and look it over together, because I think that's where, your difficulties lie.
Yeah.
Okay?
It needs to require more of them. It simply needs to be at a higher pitch of difficulty so that the students have to think and grapple. That's a challenge for all groups, to push it a little higher than they can reach. Tapping into student interest in a classroom is a very powerful thing. It's attached directly to motivation. There are a couple of things that are probably interesting to think about when we craft our lessons based on interest. One is we need to be sure it's the student's interest we're talking about and not really the teacher's interest. We need also to think in terms of the fact that not only can we acknowledge the interest that they bring to us, but that we ought to be great catalysts for expanding the world of abilities to them. And we learn as they do, and we become better facilitators.
After about 25 minutes, we'll go back to your home base, your original table, and you will teach this information to the people at home base.
I think that we need to build in to the group assignment something which requires each student to be ready to speak for the group, so that they don't necessarily always know who will be asked to present, or they don't know exactly whose paper will be the one that will be checked to give sort of an indication of where the group is, or that at any moment we might come and sit down with the group and ask any student to speak for the group in indicating quality.
As a matter of fact, I have a girl sitting over here at the table who just came over and said, I don't understand English very well. What implications does encoding have for an individual from a different culture?
I think it would be hard for you to remember the words because you wouldn't be able to relate it to anything. You wouldn't have any meaning the words wouldn't have meaning. They'd just be words, they'd just be letters, and it's a lot easier to remember things and remember like an order of letters when it has meaning to you. So like chair has meaning because I can see a chair when I look at it, but when I see a weird word like boopla, I'm not going to remember that because that has no meaning to me.
And how exactly would you tell someone from a different part of the world how to do this?
If you can relate it somehow to a parallel in their culture that they're familiar
Good,
with.
excellent.
We also need to get a sense of whether we have created tasks in such a way that every student is called on to make a contribution that they can make to the group better than anyone else.
It's important to consider how to support effective group work as you plan a lesson. It's also important to observe group function as the lesson proceeds.
When groups are working, I think it's first important to look for the level of student engagement. Do the students understand the task? Do they understand how to proceed with doing the task? And are they finding the task interesting enough to be able to invest in it?
Can we use it? Yes. Yes, and you can use the examples since we came up with them as a class.
It's really my job to make sure those things happen, and so I need to see whether there's clarity and buy-in. I also then need to look to see whether everyone in the group is able to make a contribution. Is there something meaningful that each student can do?
The first thing I look for when I'm determining whether or not the group is functioning properly is to see if they've developed a plan within their group. And I asked several kids that today, what is your plan? What I'm looking for is whether or not they're learning and that they feel successful in what they're doing. And if not, then my goal as a teacher and responsibility is to work with them and make sure that they're on target. For instance, are they focused? Are they on task? Who takes over as a leader within a group? Are they understanding the material? And I look for accountability. I look for cooperative learning, whether or not they're able to do that.
I think even at a distance from a group, the teacher can make some at least basic diagnoses. How's student body language? Is there a sense of eagerness in their faces and eyes, or hostility or boredom? So I need to be looking to see, is there a student with an attention problem, a student who's angry, a student with some emotional baggage that they're carrying from home, a kid who's lost confidence, lost interest in school? What are the dynamics there? And is the group working with that in the best way that they can? And if they are and it's still not working, then what's my role to step in and try to make something happen? I can get a pretty good start even from a distance looking at those sorts of things.
Dolan, come here. Jose found this great book. How about if you guys read together? Jose, could you read with Dolan and help him? He's having a hard time finding some things. I know you guys are good buddies.
I think I'm probably a wiser teacher if I cause all of the students to have to write, for example, if there's something they need to produce or to be doing something. And so then I can move a little closer and see what's on people's papers. Does it seem to be of about the same length, quality, understanding, buy-in? What can I tell from what they're actually putting down?
Another key role of the teacher is coaching for learner success.
But what would you do with the three numbers?
Add them together, then divide with the answer you get.
Go ahead, show me.
I think it's important for a teacher to make some conscious judgments about when to coach a student. When a teacher goes to a student and engages in some sort of a conversation that can lead to coaching, it might be important for the teacher just to begin by saying, talk to me about why you think we're doing what we're doing. What do you think is really important about this? I think a teacher coaches best when that teacher looks at what's happening with that person and says, so now what do we do to make it better? To what degree does the student understand the ideas? To what degree can they use the skills? And what do I do to push that a little bit further forward?
Since you obviously understood the averaging, I want you to try something a little bit different, okay? I'm going to give you the average and a series of scores, and I'd like you to just try finding the missing one, all right? Now we have to walk through this together. Here with 27, 36, and blank, the average ended up being 26. Well, how do you suppose I discovered that it was 15?
You subtracted this.
I think in general, struggle precedes success, and we need to let students struggle, and we need to affirm that struggle is okay. Often as teachers, we punish struggle by showing students that if they don't get it automatically,